What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Force Sensitive, and I think I'm probably going to screw this number up, but I'm going to give it a shot. This is episode 8, Gord?
Yes, it is.
This is going to be the controversial one.
I hope so.
And we have a lady joining us, which is only, as we know, just leads to problems in Star Wars.
I take offense to that. Thank you very much.
I wouldn't have it any other way. We have Miss Anna with us this morning. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you guys today?
Quite well. It's nice
Doing great.
to have a woman's voice to listen to for 2 hours as opposed to all these gravelly men for the past 7 episodes. So thank you.
Well, I am privileged to be here.
Female privilege or white privilege?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, both.
Both. Nice. Double tap. Before we get too into the woods on this episode, I do want to take a minute and advise everybody to check out the notes for this episode. There will be a link to a GoFundMe. One of the members of our community, one of our listeners, part of the Nerd Rage family, as far as I'm concerned, has fallen on some poor luck with his mother. His mother's encountered some health issues. It's family issues that I've encountered with my mother, so disregard that. My Freudian slip coming through. But his mother has come upon some health issues and could use your help. So take a minute, look into the notes, click on it, take a read. If you have $1 laying in the couch that you're not going to use, or you have some spare change in a jar that you've been setting aside for a rainy day, it's looking awfully cloudy on his horizon. So do the dude a solid. Good dude as well. All right, with that out of the way and all the bad news out of the way, I feel like we should have some sort of palate cleanser. Like we should play Ewok celebrations right after bad news every time, just to kind of elevate everybody back up. But we have.
I don't think that's going to elevate most people.
But we do have Anna joining us. Anna, what is your first memory of Star Wars?
My first memory of Star Wars. My friends and I sitting around waiting to leave to go to see Return of the Jedi.
So you saw them out of order as well.
Actually, I saw them in order, but I don't remember seeing the first two.
I gotcha. So you got to see one in the theaters. That's pretty awesome.
I did. It actually was it was a neighborhood affair.
A community of sorts.
It was.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you had lived my neighborhood was pretty nice growing up as well. But I lived in the type of neighborhood where you couldn't do anything bad outside because they were definitely going to either rip into you verbally, or they were going to inform your parents. And it was kind of, I feel like today it's like, my kid didn't do anything wrong, but like I feel like in my day it was like, what did my kid do wrong?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my neighbors, they had free hand they could smack you upside the butt if they wanted to. If you were screwing up in their house, don't do it.
Yeah. Gort, was your neighborhood like that as well? Like a close, like not close, like they came for Christmas or anything, but just like said hi to everybody, and you were afraid to do anything bad in front of your neighbors because it was just like doing something bad in front of your parents. Did you grow up in that sort of environment?
Not really. I mean, I was friends with like the neighborhood kids, and we were in and out of each other's houses a lot. But we didn't really have Agnes watching from the window to talk it up.
No. What a bummer. All right. Enough about our neighborhoods. So that was the first memory that you have of it.
Right.
And how did you feel? How was that experience going with the whole community, going with friends in the neighborhood, the whole bit? Was it celebratory or?
It was the most fun I've ever had at a movie.
Okay.
And that's including as an adult, going with a bunch of our friends to go see movies. That was the most fun I've ever had seeing a movie.
That's awesome. I think, was it the first movie you saw?
No.
Okay. What was your first movie?
I do believe it was Bambi.
Oh, God. What a bummer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I need to play the Ewok celebratory music. Gort, what was your first movie that you saw in the theater?
My first movie that I saw in the theater.
Mm.
It might be that I can remember. It might be The Land Before Time. Also a bit of a bummer.
That's true. That is true. I think mine was E.T.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure. It was either E.T. or Ghostbusters, but I would double down on E.T.
I think you should tell people Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I would.
That's just a lot cooler.
Yeah, I don't know, man. E.T.'s pretty cool, and he's in Star Wars, so it's like a workaround, you know, in universe. So after that, do you remember going back and watching the first, 4 and 5 to kind of refresh your memory and sort of dive deeper into kind of understanding that world?
Yeah, I remember sitting down with my dad because my dad was a big Star Wars guy.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with him and watching them, and we literally started tearing them apart. We were breaking them down scene by scene and going through.
That's
And I
awesome.
remember sitting there looking at him going, this is the weirdest thing ever, but it was so cool. Because it wasn't, the nerddom wasn't like it is now, where that's the norm. You go through and break down movies.
Right.
It wasn't like that back then.
Right.
But, my dad and I sitting there doing that, it was fun, but it was odd all in the same breath.
Was your dad like an analytical type of guy, or was this something special? Like, was he a thinker? Or is he a thinker? I don't know if he's still around. I don't mean
Yeah, he's still around. He's still around.
I don't mean to put him in the past tense on you.
Not necessarily he wouldn't necessarily break down things like that, but occasionally he would come across something that he was really into and he would start analyzing it from beginning to end. He had to be really into it though. So Star Wars is one that he's really into.
Was he what did he do for a living, if you don't mind me asking?
He's actually a postal carrier.
Oh, no kidding. My mom
Yes.
my mom worked for the post office as well. See, my dad was he was a fireman, but he was a blue collar, like a very always had dirt on his hands type of guy. But when it came to Star Wars, he would make this exception and dig a bit deeper. I remember one time we went to we were in Myrtle Beach. We went to this film. It was some film appreciation thing, and we thought it was going to be you sit down for a half hour and they show you clips of movies, and this has dramatic music and it kind of goes through the history of Hollywood or whatever. It wasn't that at all. It was this circle of people talking about movies, and my dad mentioned Throw Mama from the Train is one of his favorites. My dad is not a deep guy at all. He's very much a nuts and bolts kind of guy, but he did also make the exception with Star Wars, for whatever reason. And he's not a huge sci-fi guy or anything like that either, but it was something about the religious elements and the kind of spirit and human will against hyper advanced technology that spoke to him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
My dad is a big Clint Eastwood fan.
Mine
Star
as well.
Wars is way out of his norm, because he doesn't even watch Star Trek. He's
same.
Star Wars is the only space thing he actually watches.
Yeah, exactly the same. I wonder what it is. I wonder why that is. What's your thoughts on that, Gort? You're a bit of a thinker.
I don't know. I think it's just a matter of fantasy element, and there's a large amount that's not realistic in the slightest with Star Wars. I mean, you look at a TIE Fighter or Slave One, that can't fly, in actuality. And you watch something else, everything is sleek and looks like it might work. But Star Wars, nothing works, and I think that's a big draw. It's very otherworldly.
And I also wonder if it isn't that Western element, that cowboy element. The cantina, the bar, the old saloon. I wonder if that didn't attract people like our fathers, and then only after they saw it a couple times did they start seeing things that they wouldn't normally see in any other movie. Something to think about. Did you have brothers?
I do not. I actually have a baby brother, but he's my half brother, so I don't really have a lot of contact with him.
Huh.
But no, I had an older sister who was in love with Harrison Ford, so Han Solo was, I have to have him. But
Right. Because I mean that's I think that's something else that's I feel like is a little bit, it felt like anyway, uncommon for young girls to be into that sort of thing. Now I feel like it's much more common for young girls to be into Marvel or superheroes or Wonder Woman or Star Wars or what have you. But I feel like in that time there seemed to be a much more of a division between boy properties, quote unquote, and girl properties.
Well, there was a thing. I lived in a neighborhood of 35 houses. Out of those 35 houses, about 15 of them had kids. Mm-hmm. There was one other girl in the neighborhood.
Well, there you go.
So I grew up playing football with the guys outside, playing baseball, going to my friend's house and, playing with their Hot Wheels cars and the G.I. Joes and stuff like that. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Like I heard recently that if you find a girl that's funny, you should first find out how many brothers she has. So did you collect any of the toys or any of the merchandise as well as a kid or no?
The only thing that I remember collecting, because my mom wouldn't let me have a lot of action figures. They were not girl toys, so I wasn't allowed to have them.
Exactly.
I had to trade for G.I. Joes. It was really bad.
Right.
But the only thing that I remember collecting is they had the Return of the Jedi trading cards that you got like 5 in a pack with the stick of, the stick of the nasty gum.
Of course.
But I remember having those, and I had the entire set. And now I only have 1 card left.
Huh. At least you got one.
Yeah.
That's something, like you could probably, frame that someplace special, like make a thing out of it, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I remember the same thing, like that famous She-Ra story of mine, like the division of, the pink aisle versus the blue aisle, and never shall the two meet.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, so you watched the movies? Were you an avid viewer? Like I know you broke them down with your father, but outside of that, did you watch them with friends or your sister or anything else, like repeatedly, or was it always kind of on?
Not until I was older.
All right, well, let's dig into that a bit then. So, so on a scale from 1 to 10, where do you put Caravan of Courage for one before we move on?
I've never seen it.
Ooh.
I'm sorry. I've broken your heart. I'm so sorry. No, I've never seen it.
What a travesty. Good grief. I'll don't worry. I'll text Russ for Christmas ideas.
Okay.
Did you? So let's stay in that obscurity then. Did you see? I take it you didn't see the other Ewok film then as well.
No.
What about the Christmas special?
No. Thank God.
Yeah, I haven't.
Evidently, I have dodged a bullet on that one.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well.
It's a pretty big bullet.
And I feel like the fandom, it splits on that thing, and I feel like the half the fandom has devil horns and a tail on one side of my shoulder, and the other half has halo and angel wings on the other side of my shoulder, and they're like one's like, don't ever do it,
Right.
stay pure. And 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 then the other side is always like, just do it, it's so terribly ridiculous that you love it. And I'm like, I don't know,
It's like a train wreck you got to watch.
Yeah. So how did the dark times impact you, like if at all, the era of no merchandise, no films, no anything, just clean slate in regard to the franchise? It didn't affect me very much. It was always, I would love to see something new, but it wasn't really deeply embedded in me at that point. Right.
I was just like, I have my life to live. I have things I have to do, because I was graduating from high school. I was,
Right.
getting done, because I was born in 1975. So
Okay.
I've been, Star Wars has been part of my life my whole life, but I
Right.
wasn't deeply involved until I was actually, in my late teens.
How did it come back for you in that regard?
When they released the first box set.
The THX?
Yes.
Okay. So here's a story about the THX that I've held on to for a long time. Oh, God. I probably shouldn't talk about this. So I dated a girl before my wife. I had two serious, and I'm using the term relatively loosely because I was like in middle school and then freshman in high school and a sophomore. But they were long relationships, both of them, especially this one in particular. I dated her for a year, and like from 8th grade to 9th grade, being with a girl for a year. I think that's significant.
That's like forever.
Right. But that's the type of person I am. Like, I latch on. Like, if you're with me, then I'm with you to the end. Like, I'm just that way. That's why I've kept so many friends. It's why my wife and I have been together since, forever. I'm just that way. I pack hard, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so there came a point where I was doing pretty well for myself money-wise at that age. Better than I should have been doing if all cards are on the table. And I didn't spoil her per se, but I did treat her well. And I treated her to many things for the time, CDs or whatever, like, lunch, dinner, that sort of thing. But, that's a 13, 14-year-old kid. And one day I went out, spent the day with a buddy. This is before cell phones, and I think it might even be before I had a pager. I had one of those trash, like translucent color pagers that everybody had, and but it was before all that. And I told her I was going out with a buddy for the day, and we went around town and did hood rat stuff with my friends. And I came back, and I had a answering machine, and it was like loaded with missed calls from her and all this stuff. And it was like some of it was like some of it was like implying that because she couldn't get in touch with me, that she was going to hurt herself. And I was like, oh my God, like that's insane. So I knew that I had to part ways with this person. And I had to do it gradually, and I had to do it carefully, with kid gloves, so to speak.
Right.
So, like I said, I had treated her very well, and I had made a significant financial investment into this relationship. And we had an anniversary coming up, and I wanted to cash out. And I told her it was two things that I wanted, and the other thing's not important given the context, but I wanted that THX box set.
Oh, wow.
And I got it. And we broke up shortly thereafter. And it was terrible of me. It was petty of me. But I was also like 14 years old. And
right.
Yeah, that was I always, whenever I think about that box set, I think about my behavior at that time. Not so fondly, but also with a devilish grin, perhaps. But yeah, I had it as well, and I remember it being a big deal. And I also, there's a lot of people that don't remember, but like owning things on VHS, like properly owning them when the original trilogy was coming out, was kind of a big deal.
They were expensive.
Let me ask you this: because it's an interesting topic, and we're making pretty good time. What was the first VHS that you remember owning at a like super reasonable price? Like it was part of the rollout of the movie. Like it came out, it was in theaters, it did well in theaters, it got out of theaters, and then you picked up the VHS for like $20.
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
What about you, Gord?
I don't remember them ever really being cheap, like bargain bin, but not like a new movie.
No.
So the first one that I remember is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like it was readily available at VHS for sale.
The first TMT?
Yep, the very first one. Like is that 80, 90 maybe? I don't know. But I remember that one being readily available at VHS, like for stores, like for sale. Because I remember the films before that, I would ask like the person at the counter, and they would be like $100 sometimes for like a movie that was on VHS. So when these movies came out, I only had Empire on VHS, and I'm not sure how my dad got it, but I had the other two taped off of HBO. And when the THX set came out, I tried to tell my dad, I was like, "Look, man, I want these." And I remember my dad saying, "Like, you already have them." And I was like, "Well, like I have them, Dad, but I also have, it's Hatari plays before one of them, and True Grit plays before the, you know what I mean?" Like, but he wasn't having it. You know, my dad's like a thrifty guy. Like, you know, like any holes in them socks, then they're fine. But I remember, you know, I kind of hustled her out of those, and I guess more so her parents, because it's not like she was working or anything. Right. But yeah, it's kind of a guilty moment I have. Anyway, so let me ask you this: being as though you were born in '75, and then these movies are coming out, you would have been in high school. Right. What was it like on the flip side, right? So, like, a lot of us are obviously men that are into this sort of stuff, and the conversation often comes up of how do you break it to a girl that you start dating? You know, how do you expose that skeleton in your closet? But I would imagine that it's perhaps even more complicated for a woman to do so.
Yes.
So talk about that for a bit. How was your dating and high school experiences in letting people in on that information?
I've only had one other guy that I dated other than Russ that knew that I was into a lot of this stuff.
Really?
And he was just as nerdy as I was. but that relationship didn't last too terribly long. But then when I started dating Russ, it was like, he came over to my house. The first weekend he came over to my house, he was like, we were sitting down, and I remember we were sitting in my room, and he looked over, and I had this collection of unicorns, and he goes, oh, he said, that's interesting. And I was like, yeah, it's very girly. And I said, but, and we started talking, and he was mentioning something about G.I. Joes, and I started talking about those. And then I started we got into Star Wars, and he goes, oh, wait a minute.
Right.
It rolled from there. And it's really difficult because as a female, you're sitting there and you're talking to this guy and you're going, well, this is cool. I get to talk to somebody about this stuff. And then you go, oh, wait a minute. This might ruin this.
Right.
This might completely send this down the toilet.
Do you so the gentleman that you dated before Russ that you didn't inform, why? Like, what was do you remember any of that? Any kind of, anxiety is probably overplaying it, but anything in relation to that?
Yeah, if they weren't particularly nerdy, I wasn't going to tell them, because if they weren't into it, it had to be that they had to bring it up first. Okay. And then you actually have to play as a female, you actually have to play stupid for a little bit. And that you don't know, oh really, what is this that you're telling me, what's this thing that you're talking about? And then because you don't want to come out as being yeah, well, I know more about this than you do. Right.
I often wonder about my sister because she grew up with 3 older brothers, technically 5, but three in the house. And and we were all over that stuff, and like as a result, she's like picked up a lot of stuff, kind of osmosis wise. But she's not really a fan of any of it. But she's like probably more knowledgeable than most. And I wonder how that has affected her relationships. If boys have ever brought something up, and she'd be like, yeah, I know about that. I know who this character is and that character and their kind of backstory. And I would imagine that for a certain cut of or swath of that cloth that would be a huge kind of not turn on, but that too. But but more so like an alluring thing, that you would have this kind of stereotypical boy. I guess it's the same thing when men like are super into cars and they meet a girl that's like her dad was a mechanic or whatever, and she grew up. Right. I would imagine it's the same type of thing.
Well, I work in the automotive industry, and the guys that I work with, I sell auto parts. Okay. The guys I work with, they're amazed every time I know something that a girl typically wouldn't know.
Right.
And it's the same thing. I'm like, I go, you guys got to understand where I came from. Yeah.
Right. So let's start digging in a bit to the EU, which I know you are a fan of.
Yes, I am.
Let's start with the Thrawn trilogy. What was that experience like for you as those books were coming out?
I remember going down, I would ride with my friend down to the mall, and RJ was little, and I would drag RJ with me. And he, we'd go to the bookstore, and I'd have to get the newest books. Mm-hmm. And I'd go home, and they were done. I was finished with them in 2 days.
Yeah.
Russ always picked on me about reading so much. And I said, hey, I'm reading to the baby. And, I was in love with Thrawn. I thought he was the best character ever. And I kept wanting, I was like, we need a movie about Thrawn. I want to see a movie with Thrawn in it.
Yeah, I agree. So you had a baby at this point?
Correct.
So, wow. So that opens up a whole new can of worms. What, that baby that you were reading Star Wars to as an infant, mm-hmm. where is that individual in regard to, how do they feel about Star Wars and that sort of stuff? Being exposed to it at such a young age.
RJ is a huge Star Wars fan.
That's awesome.
Yeah, both of my kids are. They actually, when Rebels started, they were like, Mom, you have to watch this. I said, all right, let's do it.
That's awesome. So is there anything kind of, poetic for you about that? Like, enjoying it with your children and then, having enjoyed it with your father as well?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's a great way for us to bond. It even seeps in the conversation just about every week or so, we end up in a conversation about something new that's come out about Star Wars, or something that one of their friends has said online or something like that. And we end up in a long discussion about it, which is really neat to see their intake, their input into them.
Interpretation.
How they're seeing it. Because my kids are 23 and 18.
God, you're lucky.
Okay, if you say so. I just had my kids when I was young and stupid.
Yeah. I won't disagree with that either. As though I got girls, and I can only imagine how I would react, because I'm like, there goes my retirement. Yep. So the other thing that I wanted to address regarding that is just to have all cards on the table. I am fond of you. I like you personally.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's very kind of you. But there is something that we have to address, and that is the lie that you've told me. And
that I've read Truth at Bakura?
Yes.
I have read it.
No, you haven't.
I've actually read it twice.
And I take it as a personal assault.
And I love that book, actually. It is, I will admit, it is hard to get into it. It really doesn't pick up until about 3/4 of the way through. But I'm a huge Anne Rice fan, so I'm used to a book not getting good until almost the end.
So from that era, before the prequels kind of took off, there was a ton of books that came out. If you were to do a top 3, and you can count a whole series as one, so you could say the Thrawn trilogy is one. If you had to do your top 3 of that era, what would they be?
Probably the Thrawn trilogy, Children of the Jedi, and Planet of Twilight.
I like Planet of Twilight as well, I think.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read that stuff.
Yeah, me too. I was actually, I was looking on my shelf earlier, and I've lost a lot of my books. One from a house fire and, years ago, stuff like that. But yeah.
Terrible.
So I would love to get a hold of them. I know I've pulled them from the library a couple of times and read them, but yeah.
What would be your bottom 3?
My bottom. I tell you what, you know what? I have to say, Splinter of the Mind's Eye. It just didn't fit for me.
Yeah.
I read it and it did not fit for me. Not a lot. That one really, it did not. Darth Plagueis.
It was written at a weird time too.
That's
the
true.
way that book comes about. It almost really doesn't count in my head either at all.
I agree.
It doesn't seem to fit at all.
No.
It's like this is a dream world.
Definitely.
So, you were going to say Darth Plagueis. I'm interested to hear this.
Darth Plagueis. Yeah, Russ loves that book.
A lot of people do.
I'm like, I can give it give or take. It's one of those. Okay, yeah, I read it. It's not
really.
It's not that great to me.
I haven't read it. I've read I got 100 pages into it, and then some life event happened. I can't remember which, but it took all of my attention for a couple weeks. And then I'm just that guy. Like if I leave something for a couple weeks, I'd have to go back and start it all over again. And I was like, I can't recommit to this. But I've been meaning to read it.
Right.
Any other ones stand out to you as being one that you didn't necessarily, care for or were super enthused about?
Dark Saber, and only because Luke was in love with Callista and not me.
Yeah. And I can't help but notice that Truce at Bakura was not mentioned, probably because you never read it. But moving on to the prequel era.
No, hold on. Okay, Truce at Bakura. The entekment process is actually very intriguing to me, where they take the actual spirit, like the force of everyone, and they use it to power their machinery. It's just awesome.
I have no idea what you're talking about because I've never read it.
You should read the book.
I've tried.
Before moving into the prequels, now having just gotten into the books, and you have children's situation and everything. When Shadows of the Empire came out, how did that land?
Oh my gosh! So I started reading Shadows of the Empire, and I was going. I first picked it up, and I went, this happens between Empire and Return. I was like, okay. Started reading it, and I looked at Russ, and I said, you need to read this. Yeah, I know. Started reading. I finished it. I said, you absolutely need to read this. He goes, but he said, I'll read it sometime. I said, no, you have to read this. He still hasn't read it, by the way.
What?
This has been years. I have it sitting on my shelf. I got the omnibus one from you last year, Gort, and I've read that, and I'm like, you need to read this. He goes, I'll read it. And I'm like, no, seriously, this is why everything happened. But yeah, that's definitely one of my top ones is Shadows of the Empire.
Did you play the game as well?
No.
Did you get the soundtrack?
No.
See, I'm always curious about that because that was their kind of blueprint for how they were going to market Star Wars from sort of that point forward, at least for the foreseeable future at the time. So I'm always kind of curious as to what landed with people. Like I had everything but the soundtrack, which is ironic because, especially at that time, music was at the forefront of my life. But right. I think when I saw John Williams' name wasn't on that thing, I was like, well, who needs it? Like, I was like, this doesn't count.
Yeah. Yeah, unless he's doing the score, it doesn't count.
Yeah. Yeah, which, you know what I mean? We got to start transitioning here soon because the last one is approaching.
Might have a bit of a sad face right now hearing about that soundtrack.
Yeah.
Gort loves it. And to be fair, I just haven't ever really given it a fair shake. But I just at the time it didn't land. Like I ended up getting the figures. I got the comic. I got the book. I got the video game. Like almost every piece of merchandise hit for me, with the exception of the music. But it just, I am the data point, that they were looking for, I suppose.
Yeah.
So moving into the prequel trilogy, do you remember the first time that you saw the trailer for Episode 1?
Yes.
Talk about it.
I was actually at home and I didn't realize that it was coming on, and it just popped up on the TV and I was like, oh, wait, right. What's this? And I stopped dead. I think I was getting ready to head into the kitchen to clean or something like that. And I just remember stopping dead and watching it. And I looked at Russ and I said, we're going to go see that. And he goes, okay, no problem. It was like, I said, no, there's no question. We're going to go see that. We ended up going like 2 weeks after it opened though. But
now where was his, kind of, how did he feel about Star Wars?
He was a fan, but not fanatic.
Gotcha. So you guys end up seeing it 2 weeks after it's out.
Yes.
And what is your impressions? How do you walk away from that experience?
I was in love. I broke into tears at the initial, no, I was like, oh, I literally started crying.
No kidding.
It was that emotional for me. And I actually had RJ with us. RJ was like 3.5. We drug him to the movies with us. I was like, you're coming to see Star Wars. He was like, okay, I go see Star Wars.
Yeah.
And, he sat with us. He fell asleep halfway through, of course, because that's what kids do at movies.
Right.
But I was holding him in my lap, and I am bawling into his head. I'm like, oh, my gosh, it's Star Wars. And Russ was looking at me like, oh, my gosh, she's crying. Yes.
Was that his first movie?
That was RJ's first movie, yes.
That's pretty awesome. So I guess the more sensitive stuff regarding that, like what was let's talk about the big three, right? The stuff that people normally pick apart when it comes to that movie. Let's start with the small and work our way big, so to speak. The pod race. How do you feel about that?
I loved the pod race.
Mm-hmm.
It was the flight through the asteroid field, looking for a place to hide from the Empire. It was a space battle without being a space battle. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was what you needed in that movie to kind of pump it up.
Yeah, it's really the kind of climax of the second act. What about young Anakin? Mannequin Panickin.
I actually liked him. The fact that he was kind of a whiny kid,
mm-hmm.
He was but he came across as, I don't care. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. This is who I am. This is how I am.
Yeah.
He came across very egotistical, which I liked, knowing that he's going to become Darth Vader. You want him to be a bit egotistical, a bit, I don't care about you. I'll force choke you to death.
Mm-hmm. And then Jar Jar.
I loved Jar Jar. I'm actually in the minority on that. I love Jar Jar. You need a little comic relief in a movie like that.
And sometimes a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always commented on that, but how many times I try to justify that character. But, I do see the charm in him to a level of he's such a buffoon that that he's able to be taken advantage of in order for the chancellor to get the supreme whatever supreme power or whatever it is of the Senate. Like, that does end up becoming a crucial thing, and it does work kind of thematically when he's such an idiot.
Exactly. If you don't have the development of him coming across from episode 1 as this easily manipulated character, you don't have Palpatine becoming coming into power.
Yeah, I agree. So let me ask you this. What characters from the episode 1 really resonated with you?
I hated Obi-Wan Kenobi in episode 1.
Really?
I thought he's
kind of a goody two-shoes.
Yeah. He was, I was like, that's not Obi-Wan. That's Obi-Wan just kind of bucks the system, kind of deal, and questions Yoda, and in that one he was very, very proper and very, I don't know, master. And, but Qui-Gon I fell in love with. I actually was upset that they killed him off. Yeah,
I think he is. I think the best characters of that movie, Ben Quadinaros aside, are unfortunately both killed in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I wish they would have had more development of Maul.
Oh, for sure. That's such like it's like having a Ferrari and crashing it before it ever gets above 35 miles an hour.
Yes.
So then episode 2.
I didn't really care for it.
No?
No.
What's your issues with episode 2? Let's talk about it.
It seemed to drag.
Oh, what a drag?
It seemed to drag on. It just, it was not, I don't know. I mean, it developed the relationship, between Padme and Anakin, but sure. It did not, I don't know. It just seemed like, okay, it's filler. It's a jumping off point to get us to the final movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do think, I just watched those films recently, and I do think that unfortunately a lot of time is spent on their relationship that probably should have been spread across the first 2 films, which would have made it a bit more digestible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I loved the politics in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because you get a good, and I love the politics of Star Wars. And you start delving into the politics of it, and it is such a, it's such a relatable political system to what's going on in the world today, or has been going on in the world over the years.
Definitely. What is your favorite moment of that movie? Being as though it's not one that you particularly care for. What is your favorite moment?
When Padme's climbing up to the top of the pole and Obi-Wan says, I think she's doing okay by herself.
The correct answer is when she's wearing the black dress. That's the correct answer.
That is a beautiful dress. I will say that.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. How was it seeing like an army of Jedi? Because that was something kind of, I think that we overlook that now, like, because it seems so, not normal, but it doesn't seem abnormal. Where for the time, like, to see that many Jedi with that many lightsabers kind of activated and going to war, it was crazy.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those, oh crap, that's a lot of Jedi.
Right. What about the Yoda scene? We always have to talk about that.
I love that. I love the
so
scream
does Gort.
Too.
So does Gort.
I think that is when he doesn't even draw his lightsaber. He just come here. Yeah, I was like, it was so Wild West. OK Corral. You know what I mean? Flipping the robe back. It was reminiscent, like we were talking earlier. It's very Wild West. Very it had that feeling to it, that it was like the showdown of the OK Corral. Let's do this. Yeah,
for sure. How did you feel about Dooku as a character?
I didn't really care for Dooku.
Yeah.
I thought he kind of was like, I'm better than everybody else. I know more than everybody else. And I kept going, you have no idea.
Yeah. I think that I think that like the nuts and bolts of him are interesting, like the internal stuff, like the stuff that you don't really hear about in the film. You know, like his relationship with the Jedi and how it was changed and altered, and how he kind of got to the place that he is, and where he. Because I do think that Dooku is one of those bad guys in Star Wars that really does think that he's doing it for the right reasons.
Right.
And I think all that stuff is fascinating, but they don't really discuss any of that stuff in those films. And as a result, he just sort of seems like, he only got to be a Sith Lord because he could keep solid foods down at his age.
Right. They didn't give him enough development at all. I think if they would have been able to develop him a little bit more, get a little bit of his backstory as to how all of a sudden you go from Maul to Dooku, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It kind of seemed like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, it does seem like a strange tactical choice if you were Sidious to get to have this young, super, dedicated almost to like a zealot level of apprentice, and then like, all right, well that didn't work out too. Is there any 80-year-old men around? I'm looking for an 80-year-old man, preferably one that can keep solid foods down. That's what I'm looking for. It does seem strange.
Yeah, it does.
So, what about episode 3? Well, actually, before we get there, how do you feel now? So, episode 1 did hit with you, where it did. Where it did miss with a lot of people, and then episode 2 missed for you, and it kind of was. I think it kind of landed in this weird limbo state for a lot of people. So, where is your kind of feeling about the prequel trilogy at this point, leading up to episode 3?
I'm hoping that they get the final battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin right.
Right.
That they do it justice.
How did that pay out for you?
Very well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have the high ground. I went, oh no.
Yeah.
I was like, don't do it. I'm sitting in the theater watching it and I'm going, Anakin, no, it doesn't end well for you.
I think that's also a bit of a metaphor as well. So walking into episode 3 and then walking out of it, what was your, like, how do you feel about that movie? First viewing.
I loved episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they did it so well. Even the ending where they had Vader coming off screaming no, it was a little over the top, but I could understand the agony. He's thinking that his child is dead. He knows that Padme's dead. He had to have felt Padme's death in the Force anyways.
Yeah.
But the fact that he didn't know that his child was dead, the fact that he didn't even know he was having twins,
right? That
makes me wonder, couldn't you feel that there was two personalities in there,
So, that is an interesting thing. Like, it often pops up at my house, like when we're watching Clone Wars in particular, right?
Mm-hmm.
That once you throw Jedi and you establish that they're powerful Jedi, once you throw them into any given scenario, it does open up this can of worms of, well, why aren't they doing this, or why don't they realize this? And I think most of the times they just do it because they need the plot to work, and they just they just let it go. But it always comes down to like, well, why don't they just do this? And it is, or why doesn't Anakin realize they're twins? Why doesn't he feel them in the Force when he's in the Vader suit? For all that time, why doesn't he find them and get them? Why doesn't Ahsoka or Anakin in the Clone Wars just use the Force and kill 20 droids instead of run and act like they're in real danger?
Exactly.
It is an interesting challenge, I think, that Star Wars faces when it comes to the power level and mysticism of the Force. But I think they could explore that more if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
It could because if there was like an exhaustion that was in regard to it, almost when like Yoda moves the X-wing and then just sort of kind of sits into himself, or when Luke uses the Force projection and like he's spent, like if they were able to show that like there is a power meter of some sort, like, and you can run out of special moves, like.
I actually relate it to like Naruto with the chakra. You run out eventually.
Right.
You have to power it back up again. And that's about as close, but they don't show it very well in the movies.
Yeah.
It can't. If like you said, if they had like a power meter, put a little power meter over their heads.
Right.
This is how much Force they have left.
Right. How do you feel about that, Gort?
Well, I think if there was a power meter above their heads, it better be finished.
Not that specifically. But do you run into that in your head canon at all while watching a movie? Like, well, why didn't they just do this?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's weird in instances. If you could do one thing at one moment, why can't you do it now? And not because power might be depleted. Just it's a matter of story writing and all that stuff too.
Sure.
But sometimes I just feel like that's bullshit and unacceptable given the circumstances. But saying that end moment there, you're seeing a lot of action and you know how it has to go. So you're sort of cheated from what might actually have gone down for what needs to happen instead.
Right.
It's the same thing with Yoda and Palpatine.
Right. So I will say this too after watching this movie, that segment, that end sequence, like where there's this juxtaposition between Anakin and Obi-Wan and also Yoda and Sidious, and then it kind of evolves into Anakin dying and being reborn as Vader and Padme dying and giving birth to new life. That whole entire sequence, it might be the best edited thing in any Star Wars film.
Yes.
Like, it's amazing editing work. Like, it mirrors itself so beautifully, and the music works for it, and thematically it all works. Like, it is a cut above, and I think because those films are kind of seen with a certain lens over them, that sometimes you can't appreciate, or sometimes many don't appreciate, the things they really got right. And
right.
I couldn't help but notice it. That I always talk about it, but that Duel of the Fates kind of reaching its climax while that podium is coming up through the center of the Senate, while Yoda and Sidious are literally fighting for control of the galaxy to an extent in the political arena. Like, that is the kind of on-the-nose, beautiful, operatic epic of Star Wars for me in one sequence.
It is. It's beautiful that they decided to actually do it in the Senate, in that Senate chamber. Because it was, like you said, it's a battle for control.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. So, all right. So then we go into the Clone Wars era. Did you get involved in that at all?
Yes. The kids actually made me drag them to go see the movie, the animated movie. They were into it way more than I was, and I was told by both of them, we have to go see Clone Wars. Okay, we'll go. I said, it's a Star Wars movie. I'll put my money into it. Why not?
Right.
We went to go see it. I was neither here nor there with it. I was like, I love Ahsoka. She was wonderful. And I was like, I want to see more about her. Where did she pop up from? Because all of a sudden, poof, here you go, Anakin, you have a apprentice. I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
What's this all about? But then when the cartoon series came out, the kids were into it way more than I was. But it was, I actually started getting into it later on in the series, and I'm looking forward to actually seeing the end of it when they bring it up onto Disney.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. I can't wait for that. And like I said, I think I've mentioned this before, but I've heard rumors that it like runs simultaneous, like time wise, to Order 66 at its final moment. Like that.
Yes.
Like that could potentially be huge if they kind of have it going congruently.
Yeah.
What about, all right, so then the next big thing I feel like that happens is the Disney buyout.
That actually caused a lot of ruckus in my house.
Let's talk. Let's get into the shits.
My daughter started saying that Disney was going to ruin Star Wars, and all of a sudden you were going to see Darth Vader with mouse ears going, "It's the dark side, haha!" I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Right.
And and I kept going, no, Disney's they know what they've got. They're not going to mess it up too bad. And both my son and my daughter were like, nah, they're going to mess it up bad. They're going to screw up everything. They're going to make it too kid friendly. They're not going to make it where there's not going to be anybody dying anymore. And I said, no, they're going to have to kill somebody. And it was heated debates back and forth as to how messed up they're going to make it.
So how do they feel about the prequel trilogy? Just to cut you off real quick. How do they feel about the prequel as growing up with it as children?
They actually loved it. That was their Star Wars.
Right.
Even though I inundated them from birth with Star Wars movies, it was necessary. They had to watch it, even though their favorite Star Wars type movie is daggone it, Spaceballs.
Right.
So Yeah, I'm like, I told him, I said, yeah, I said, that's terrible that that's your favorite, but okay.
So
But,
I think.
I'm sorry. Just let me just finish this one train of thought. So, what I find funny about that, and it kind of goes to this thing I've been pushing on this show of just Star Wars being this generational idea. That you can appreciate the other elements, but the one that you grew up with is always going to be the one that feels the most right, regardless of what era it is.
Right.
I think that in 15 years, my girls are going to be saying, "Well, I grew up when it was good with Rey."
Exactly.
But to grow up with Episode 1 kind of simultaneously, and then at some point saying like, "Oh, they're going to make it for kids now," it's like, well, wait a minute, like this is probably the most kid friendly Star Wars that was ever created, and
Exactly.
you know what I mean? I find that interesting. Gort, what were you saying? I cut you off.
Oh no, nothing. Spaceballs.
Okay, so there's this debate internally in the home as to the future of Star Wars, and then you guys get to go see Episode 7, and what is the reaction?
Okay, so we went on Christmas Day. And it was, because my kids are grown, Christmas Day is completely different than it is when your kids are younger. So we had this whole plan, we're going to go see it. Well, we went to the movies, we watched it. The initial crawl, I'm sitting there reading it, and I'm going, please don't screw it up, please don't screw it up, please don't screw it up. Because I'm reading through it, and I'm going, it was Star Wars-ish, but the crawl doesn't even seem like old school Star Wars, like the original trilogy. It just, it doesn't hit me that way.
Okay.
So we went through the whole thing, and I walked out of the theater, and I looked at the kids, and I said, so who is Rey? And Rhea looked at me, and Rhea said, probably nobody.
Wow.
And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. And RJ said, well, of course she's Luke's daughter. And I was like, okay. And Russ and I got into a debate about who she was. But it didn't hit me. It didn't hit me in the feels as hard as I thought it would.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think I didn't really care for Finn. I didn't care for his character. They developed him okay, but they didn't develop him the way I would have.
Okay.
They made him kind of like almost like a wuss. Like, I'm going to run away. Yep. I got to get away from everything. And I was like, you shouldn't do that. They should have built him as, I've been beaten down. I've been through the ringer. I'm going to come out of this badder than ever. But they didn't. And then they didn't have enough Poe. They pumped up Poe with the toys and everything, and he was in very few shots. Yeah.
Do you think that I'll tell you one of the issues that I had with Finn after seeing 7, because he didn't do much for me either. He had this like real worldy vibe to him that always bothered me in that movie, like
a little too real.
Yeah, a little too Raph. And it was like, he grew up down the street. Like the way he communicated, it didn't seem to be part of that world. It seemed to be part of our world.
Right.
You have a boyfriend, a cute boyfriend, a hot boyfriend, like that. Like it didn't seem like Star Wars to me. That seemed like 40-Year-Old Virgin or Superbad or something like that.
Right. Like straight out of 90210 remake.
So did so Finn didn't resonate with you. You didn't get enough Poe. I would say honestly that we still haven't gotten enough Poe.
We haven't. Not at all.
What about? Are there any characters that did do it for you? I know you at this point you don't feel a strong connection. It doesn't hit you in your feels like you hoped and thought it would, and you think a lot of that is because you're not connecting to the characters. Are there any characters that you did connect with?
The usual Han Solo and Chewbacca.
Right.
When they walked onto the Millennium Falcon, that's the most feels I got out of that entire movie. When he said, "We're home." Yeah, Chewie, I'm like, home. Heck yeah. Yeah. I was like, yes, you are.
I wonder in hindsight, as you're saying that, I'm asking myself, like, I wonder if that didn't do, if having the original cast, which I guess you have to do to tell these stories, but if it doesn't do the new cast a disservice, like if if I can't, like if we're, or let's say we all go to all of our kids play baseball together, and we all go to see their game. I have this super strong connection with my kids, so like I don't know if I'm ever going to give your kids the real analysis of how they're performing because I'm just focused on my kids.
Right.
I wonder if there's not an effect of that with this sequel trilogy in some regard.
There probably is, but I think that you have to have them in there, but I don't. I really think it would have done them better if they had killed them all off on Hosnia.
Yeah, I don't know if you're wrong about that. I might agree with you in at least many of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you're wrong there. That is interesting. So, didn't really. What about let's cover a couple characters since we're just in the ballpark. What about Rey?
Okay. I liked her, but she seemed like I kept spending the entire time going, how does she know it? This can't be innate. This can't be something, her force powers can't be innate. This has to be something that she's known she could do. She just didn't have a name for it.
Right.
Yeah,
and to your credit, she kind of ends up saying that, in the next movie. So the other thing I was going to ask was, just because we have so much time, we're making good time on this episode. So it's funny because a lot of times we rarely get to dig deep into the later stuff because so much is spent on the early stuff. So now that we have the kind of luxury, I want to do it. How do you feel about the big mysteries of that movie? The quote unquote the JJ mystery box, right? Like which caused all the conversation, right? Who is Rey? So who is Rey specifically, and then also the kind of force back sequence.
The question of who is Rey, I like the debates that came up about it. I mean, it was interesting to go through YouTube and listen to everybody's opinion on who is Rey, where does she come from, because there were some really outlandish ones. There really were. The one that she's a clone of Palpatine, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with that idea. It would be wonderful because it would come out of the EU where Palpatine did have clones. He did have cloning chambers all over the place. But on the other hand, I'd be like, no, because that would be that's almost too obvious. And
I agree.
Yeah, and to be Luke's daughter, he would have known.
I agree.
But to be Han and Leia's daughter, that again, they would have known. She has to come from somewhere where nobody knew who she was, that it's going to be a real big mystery to kind of figure out who she is. Yeah. And I think that it's going to be I don't think that they're going to be able to do it justice. Yeah. I think that they're going to screw it up somehow.
See, I worry about that as well. And I worry about that because I'm not sure they were committed. Do you know what I mean? And then as the story progressed, they ended up kind of backing themselves into different corners, where at the end of 7, people thought she was Palpatine. People thought she was Solo. I mean, I'm hardcore in the Solo camp, but I still think it's the right choice. People were super committed that she was Luke's daughter, Obi-Wan's daughter, or granddaughter, everybody had all of these justifications for how it could work, right? Which is kind of the beauty of it. But then by the end of 8, that you pretty much you cancel out the Luke,
right?
And it's not that you necessarily it's not a hard line through it, but it makes it far more complicated to make that a thing in the last one,
right?
And I do think that, in some regard, that is one of the huge missteps of this trilogy, is that by the time they get to 9 and they really feel like they need to narrow it down, they've already eliminated a lot of options.
Exactly.
I do agree there.
They have. They've made it too difficult to have it be Luke, or have it be Han, or have it be or have it be Leia's kid from another guy.
Right.
What
about the force back scene? What was your that was another one that everybody had different theories and everything else as they walked away from that.
I don't know. It didn't. I was neither here nor there with it. It felt like it was kind of just, I don't know, stuck in.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like trying to explain why, you know?
Yeah, without explaining anything, just kind of get your mind working, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so moving into Rogue One.
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean,
That's the movie that's almost caused a divorce.
really, talk about that.
Russ hates the movie.
Oh, that's
Russ
right. I knew that.
Russ calls it lazy writing. He hates the movie. He says that there was no reason why they had to kill everybody off, and no matter how many times I try to explain to him why everybody had to die, he says, "Well, no, they could have explained them later on." I said, "No, you can't. You have to kill everyone off. You have to show the price that's actually paid." I said, when Mon Mothma says many Bothans died for us to get this information, I said, you have to understand in that one, in that movie, you have to understand a lot of people died. Right. And with Rogue One, you have to understand a lot of people sacrifice. A lot of things have to happen in order for the rebellion to win their fight.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that like it ends up having more of an impact if you think about it. Like the fact that this whole team of people kind of banded together and gave the ultimate sacrifice in order to achieve this goal, and it's the same goal that Solo kind of like callously walks away from initially.
Exactly.
Like, and then for Solo to come back, and like now that ends up meaning more, and him abandoning it ends up meaning more, and I think there are really great ramifications as a result of that. But I also understand being like, I attached myself to a lot of those characters, arguably more than any other, Star Wars film since the originals.
Oh, yeah. They're very relatable characters.
Yep. Very
relatable. If you were in that universe and you were stuck under the rule of the Empire, you could very easily become a Jyn Erso. Yeah. Especially if your father was the engineer of the Death Star. Right.
What which one hurt the most for you? Which death of that crew hurt the most for you?
K2SO.
Same here.
I knew you guys were going to say that.
I love that. Look, that droid, I have a figure of him. I have the Black Series figure of him sitting on top of a shelf right next to my bed, looking down on me as I sleep. Yeah. He guards me as I sleep.
That's the hard one for me to swallow too, and I think it's kind of the most I would say that the two most tragic deaths, not in a plot wise or even thematically, but just the way that they're done is K2SO's and Baze's.
Yep,
Baze.
Yeah, like those are the two that are like they're the most kind of dramatic deaths, I guess.
Yes.
Gord, I think you feel a way about Baze's death.
Well, I definitely do. First, I'd have to ask you. You said that it was very dramatic. Could you explain that?
Yeah. So I think there's a theme of brotherhood that speaks to me, right? Mm-hmm. And when Chirrut goes down, and you see Baze kind of make the buy-in, and what I mean by that is, Chirrut was more of the spiritual one, and Baze was more so the practical one. And he's dedicated to this cause, but he has become disenfranchised with it as a result of, I think, the events. Like in my headcanon, Baze was probably at one point just as spiritual as Chirrut, but you live through the times that they're living through, and it's kind of like if there's a God, why do kids have cancer type of thing, right?
Right.
And it's when his friend goes down, when his brother goes down, that, for one, he kind of forfeits the value of his life, because at that point, the person who he had kind of been living for was his brother. And he stands up and he starts reciting, I'm one with the Force is with me, but that is like the commitment, like that is I'm going to believe in this because he believed in it, and face down my enemy with no fear. And, and then of course it goes the way that it goes. It kind of reminds me in a way of Tool's Wings for Marie Part 2. I'm not sure if either of you are familiar with the record, but it's kind of it's okay. So Maynard's mom was a devout Christian, and she was sick, and he felt a way about both religion and the church as an institution, and his mom for being so devout in the face of the adversity that she was facing. Right? Like, how could you love someone so much that also made you this way, if what you're saying is true? And Wings for Marie, part 2, he does after she passes from her illness and complications thereof. And gone is all the anger. Gone is all the hatred for the institution, for the God, for all that stuff. It's gone. And what remains is this kind of feeling of, you know what? For you, I hope it's true. I hope it's all true. And I get that feeling from Baze as well. Like, he had kind of seen it as, he had kind of lost faith. And when his friend goes down, who was completely dedicated to it, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna believe in it for you. And that plus that theme of brotherhood, all that stuff like that speaks to me on a level. It's the same reason why I'm attracted to Captain America and Bucky. When Captain America is willing to throw it all away, you know, the you know, I'm sorry, Tony, but he's my friend. Like there's some things that live and die at that. And I don't think, like, and I don't want to get too lost in the woods or too political on it, but if we take Cap and Bucky, right, and Baze and Chirrut, to be fair, like, there are kind of ideas from the populace that come out of, you know, perhaps they're homosexuals, perhaps they are in love with one another, right? Like, that was a thing.
Right.
And I think that the reason why sometimes people default to that in those sorts of relationships is because that idea of brotherhood, that idea of two men loving each other and willing to throw down their life for one another because they've been in the shit together, is often not celebrated enough. And it speaks to me. So that's how I feel about Baze's death. That's why I find it dramatic.
They were each other's family.
Yep.
And, you know, if you think about your own family, you think about what would you do for your family? Yeah, it makes total sense.
What you got, Gort? That's going to be a hard one to combat.
Well, yes and no. See, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, like, and really not at all. But just in a dramatic sense, like, the nature of what's going on, it's a weird scene to me because of how you walk into it. There was this huge firefight that just disappeared that allowed him to walk over very casually, it felt like, to the body. And it took a lot of the moment away from me because of that. It's just like, how'd that happen? Like, you could have just walked over and hit this switch. And I took a lot of it more at face value, you know,
like a suspension of disbelief thing.
Yeah, it took me very out of the moment and out of the movie. There's a lot of things like that in that movie. And it's interesting because you get into like the deeper aspects of it, and it's weird because I agree with it all. It's just that the way that it's filmed, I don't feel like they're conveying it as well as I think they could have or should have.
Yeah, no, I think that what you're saying has merit. I think that it was, so I would say the same thing, that it was probably done for the dramatic effect of it, right? And therefore that's why it's a dramatic death. But yes, I agree with you. That it does seem like he does it a bit easier than the challenge seemed at first.
Definitely. And then after he's there, after he's made his peace, that's when the firing begins again, and, you know, a couple death troopers show up. But it's like a couple. It was like two guys. Dude throws a grenade and
it's
just
more than two. It's more
casually
than two.
blows it.
I think it's four.
Maybe, but
I think there were only six.
But he casually just gets blown up, and it's a quick cut away, which I don't care for, like, quick cuts in certain moments either. Sometimes you have to, sometimes you don't.
Right.
Bodhi, you know, he gets his message out, and it's another anticlimactic scene. He just gets kind of casually blown up, sort of like grenade thrown into the ship or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I felt a little more from that. Like, he got that message out. Like, that was very important.
No, I agree.
But that's more important to the whole, you know, world picture, not just
for sure.
One man's, you know, fallen brother.
What 1,000%, 1,000%.
Not to downplay him either.
No. I think that you're 100% right. I think it is more important to the overall story, world, and universe, but it's not as personal.
Yeah, and Chirrut's death scene is probably I like a lot of the Death Star shots, the way that they're filmed, but Chirrut's death scene is possibly the best thing in the movie. It's very memorable to me.
Yes, it is.
And then I also think that there's like I don't know. I would say that both of those. So like I would say that Bodhi's is a sacrifice for the bigger picture, right? I would say that Chirrut's is a sacrifice for the bigger picture. I would say that Cassian and Jin's are sacrifices for the bigger picture, but I think that's why the K2SO one and the Baze one speak more to me, because Baze's sacrifice is just like, it's personal. It's not for the bigger picture. And say K2SO, he's just trying to protect those two. You know, like it's not for some greater heroic good that comes, you know, a year later with a kid that can bullseye want rats in a T-16. You know, it's just to help the people that he cares about be successful. I think that's why those two deaths resonate more with me. But I enjoy that movie from front to back. Like, excuse me, I think it's probably the only adult themed Star Wars film we'll ever get. And
I think that's why I love it so much, is because it is very adult themed. Mm-hmm. It's not that's not one that's made for the kiddos.
Nope, not at all. And
I'm hoping that we get that sort of feel and theme in The Mandalorian.
I hope so too.
Me too.
Yeah.
My kids usually like they overlook Rogue One, and I don't think Selena's ever seen it all the way through because she keeps falling asleep on it. You know, because the stuff that I think that film is tackling, it doesn't speak to her 6-year-old sensibilities.
Well, like a lot of people put it down because there's no crawl. I said, well, it's not a Skywalker story.
Right. It's not a saga film. It's
no.
Yeah. I think a crawl would do it a disservice.
I think so too.
Yeah.
You don't need a crawl to know what's going on.
I agree.
See, the crawl I don't think is necessary. I like getting, like say in Han Solo, you got like the blue text at the front, like maybe a bit more than you need, but the opening music, like that jingle when it shows, you know, the Rogue One, like, you know, it says Star Wars Rogue One story.
That's jarring.
I don't like that. It's
I don't like that either.
This is cheese.
Yeah, I don't like that either. I think they didn't know what to do. You know, I think that's what that is. And I also think that a Star Wars story...
They definitely didn't know what to do.
I think a Star Wars story, I think they could leave that stuff off of those titles also. Like, just call it Solo, just call it Rogue One.
I think that they need it because the layman doesn't know better.
Oh,
you need it.
So that's true. So we're talking about two different things. I'm talking about one for the success of the thing as an entity, and you're talking about like the marketing and kind of real world financial success. And I agree with you.
I don't want it there, but I think they need it there.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But I think they could also call it like a Star Wars anthology film or something. Like they could come up with a better name than a Star Wars story.
I think that most people don't know what anthology means, so that's why
that's probably true.
They did dumb it down a bit. A Star Wars story does dumb it down a bit.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. All right, so moving into the namesake of this episode 8. How do you feel about that movie walking out?
I was confused.
Talk about it.
I didn't know what to make of it. It actually took me a couple more times watching it before I started going, you know what? It does make sense. It starts to make sense after you watch it a few times.
Yeah. So what confused you? Let's dig into this a bit.
First off, the whole Leia thing, flying out of the ship and then coming back, I was like, wait a minute. They never made it known that she knew how to use her force powers.
Right.
At all. There was no development there at all for that. Luke just showing up. I loved how they didn't make it where they didn't let you know exactly that it was a projection until the very end, which was great. But Kylo's rage, I loved Kylo's rage. He walked out and he's like, I'm going to kill this guy because he had so much rage towards Luke. And because Luke was still alive.
Right.
But that was the only good part of it, because like sending a Finn and Rose off to the casinos to go find the code breaker, I was like, what on earth? But then after the second and third time I watched it, it was to see them build that relationship from the rebellion with the kids. Because you see the kid, do the force pull for the broom and just start sweeping after, and I'm like, okay, that's to show the next generation that there are more force users that are just not trained.
Yeah.
And
I still to this day see that as, in an oversimplified manner, Luke turning the force back on.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. It was like he had shut it off and then he turned it back on again. I did love from minute one, I loved Yoda telling Luke, you're stupid.
Yeah.
You haven't learned anything.
Yeah, I love that too.
I was like, thank you, Yoda. Thank you for telling him that he's an idiot.
About himself.
Exactly.
Because that's what he does. He just holds up a mirror to him.
Yeah. And then when Yoda torches the books, Luke's like, what on earth did you do? What are you doing? Yeah. He's like, what are you doing? And Yoda's like, that means nothing. None of that means anything. You haven't learned a thing.
And he does it knowingly that they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Like,
exactly.
Already has everything that she needs. I love how he kind of continues to remain 2 steps ahead of Luke all the time.
Yeah. He kind of has to.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that scene also shows that Yoda, if you watch the progression of Yoda from episode 1 all the way through to 8, you see this progression where he slowly realizes that the Jedi aren't exactly what they should be. Yep. That they had become exactly what they were fighting against. They were egotistical. They were all about themselves, all about their own power.
Yep.
And, you finally come to where it's like, nah, she knows everything she needs to know.
Yeah, and I think that he ends up teaching Luke, one of the main themes of that movie, and he has gotten there as well. That he has gotten to this point because Yoda has learned from his failure. When he jumps into Jimmy Smith's car, he says, failed I have. And he learns from his failure, and then he teaches Luke to learn from his failure, and then Luke ends up teaching the entire world to learn from their failure, which is to me the beauty of that.
Well, if you think about it, that's a great life lesson for everyone.
1,000%.
You can't walk away from a failure and learn nothing, because then that failure was for nothing.
Correct. That's the real failure.
Mm-hmm.
Is not learning from the mistake.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wanted to get back to this because of your earlier comments. How do you feel about Finn after this movie?
I have a little more respect for Finn. He started turning into a badass.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat.
He really did pick up on that.
That scene where he takes off his headset is one of my favorite scenes of him. Like,
yes.
He doesn't want to hear it anymore. He's made the decision to finally stop running, like officially, and instead run towards the problem. And
it reminds me of Independence Day.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't disagree, and I'm not sure if it's for better or worse. But yeah. So let's talk about some of the controversial elements of it. How do you feel about Rose?
You know what? I know where Rose comes from because of the books. I wish they would have developed her a little bit more and let the general public know.
I do love that, and I think ultimately that time will tell on that one. But I do think that the whole "this is how we win by saving the things we love, not destroying the things we hate" that will end up becoming something bigger eventually.
Yes,
that
I think so too.
You'll end up seeing that on a plaque on a wall. You know what I mean? Like, what about Holdo?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not. I told you that movie was weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
The whole movie was weird to me, and I watched it 3 days ago, and I was trying to break down a lot of the movie. So
I do like that there is, I feel like, a lot to break down in that movie.
There is. I think that once 9 comes out, 8's going to make a lot more sense.
And I say that to like I don't feel at all confused by it, but I do enjoy the fact that like there's a lot to it's not a buffet,
No.
like it's a complex meal, and if it's like some complex French cuisine, and maybe French is not your cup of tea in regards to meals, and you just discard it. But even if it's not, if you take a minute to really analyze the ingredients and the different flavors that are working in an ensemble, there's a lot to talk about
Right.
with that movie. All right, what about the Luke ascending?
I thought that was beautiful that they showed him exhausted from using the Force, like we were talking about earlier, if they had a gauge. But I thought that was very it was very iconic that he did it the same way that Yoda did and Obi-Wan did.
Yeah.
His two masters had just allowed themselves to be one with the Force and, ascended that way. And he did the same thing.
Yeah. And it's almost like he feels, I think in my mind anyway, like he feels like he's reached that level,
Yes.
and maybe he wasn't ready to let it go before, but he may feel like, now is my time. Like, I'm never going to top this. Like,
yeah, especially since he had cut himself off from the Force for so long.
Yep.
And then he finally, reached out to it again, and he was like, this is where I belong.
Yeah. Ugh, guys, it gives me the chills, that stuff.
Yeah.
And that movie changes the entire way that I look at Luke, and it's for the positive. And then I guess we can go ahead and move on to Solo. Let me ask you this first. Were you excited about the premise of Solo?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's been half of the problem that I've been finding with people when discussing that movie is like, when I take a step back and I'm like, well, what did you think about this before it came out? I hear like a lot of people are like, oh, I was up for it. Like, okay, okie dokie, but I was excited just because he's my favorite fictional character of all time. But I'm not sure that I found many people that were. So seeing it, what was your reaction?
I actually loved it. I loved it for what it was. It was a good backstory as to how I wanted to know how he actually swindled the Falcon out of Lando. Mm-hmm. We knew the story, but I wanted to see it actually portrayed. I wanted to know how they would portray, because we knew that he had been with the Empire. Mm-hmm. I wanted to know how they were going to play that out, because it had always been assumed that he was a pilot for the Empire, but he actually wasn't.
Right.
And I loved that they did that, where that's how he got disenfranchised with the Empire. He went in and they were telling him, oh, we're going to make you a pilot. Yeah, sure, you can fly for us, no problem. And we're going to throw you in the trenches.
Yeah, you could say it was one of his his first disappointments after he thought he made it.
Yeah. And then you have Chewbacca.
Yeah.
And to find out why Chewbacca owed him the life debt.
Well, that's interesting. Do you think he does?
See, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think that to Chewbacca, he feels like he does, but I can see Han's side of it too, where it's like, nah, you really don't.
Yeah.
It's not something they drew attention to.
No, not
at all.
Mm-mm.
And there's something that is a little not disappointing about that. I'd like to have seen it because it's something we all know. But if it's something non-existent, I'm okay with it, because I kind of like the idea that they grew into being friends rather than Chewbacca being there out of obligation.
Yeah. I feel the exact same way.
I would. It makes the relationship a lot better if they just grew to be friends.
But it's weird to imagine it not there. You know what I mean? Like, it's been such a part of the fabric of how we see those two, and it is strange to kind of reconfigure your mind to suggest that maybe it's not the case. But I mean, he does save his life, a couple times. So
yes, he does.
It's there as well if you want it to be there, but I don't think it has to be there. I think it comes down to what he tells that Wookiee on Kessel. Whatever he tells that guy, like the mangy looking one, it looks like he's malnutrition or malnourished. That's where the answer is. Because if he tells that Wookiee, look, I got a life debt to this Joker over here, then well, then now it's what it is. But if he tells him, like, look, there's something about this guy. I got to see this thing through to the end with him. Then that changes the dynamics of it, you know?
Right.
I'm going to see if there's any subtitles on that. It probably just says Wookiee talk.
It probably does.
Yeah. Okay, so, and that kind of takes us up to where we are now. I guess we could talk about Rebels briefly. Did you watch Rebels?
Yes.
Yes, I thought I remembered you saying so. And how do you feel about that?
I actually loved Rebels. It not just because it was a talking point with me and the kids. It was something that we could actually sit and watch together because they were really into Rebels. But I liked the fact that they showed the rebellion being built, and that was not just the fights and stuff like that, but they actually showed the political side of it as well, which I'm really into the politics of it.
Right.
And then I was upset with the fight between Maul, the non-fight between Maul and Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
That was disappointing, to say the least.
Yeah, I just watched a breakdown on that recently, and they said something that I had never noticed before, but it is true, and it did. And I'm only mentioning this to you because it may affect how I see it, because I'm with you. That fight should have been more.
Yes.
But the choreography of that fight mirrors the choreography of his fight with Qui-Gon, except Obi doesn't fall for it.
Huh. You know what? I didn't think of it that way. Yeah.
I never had either. But it's like the exact same moves, except Obi-Wan gets the best of him and doesn't take the bar to the face, so to speak.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to rewatch that now.
Yeah, I know. Yes. I felt the same way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we feel about what's coming. How do we feel about The Mandalorian?
Oh, I'm getting Disney Plus because of Mandalorian.
Did you already buy into Disney Plus?
I hadn't yet, and I saw the trailer for Mandalorian, and I went, yeah, I'm definitely getting it now.
Yeah. What about that do you find alluring?
I like that they're actually going to delve into the story. It's a story that needs to be told. There's no real. They kind of bring up the Mandalorians. You know, you have Boba Fett, you have Jango Fett, and then you have, Rebels with the Mandalorians, and you have no story about them. Nothing.
Yeah, I would say that we probably get the most of it with Clone Wars and Rebels. That's probably where we get the most meat on that bone. But I agree. There is something about them that it does feel like it is appropriate to have them kind of locked in to the kind of canon. And when I say canon, it's what Gordon and I talk about. If it's not in a movie, it doesn't kind of count. And I think a TV show is going to work as well. But I feel like once that happens, it will feel more solid, like who the Mandalorians are, what they're about, etc. I hope so anyway.
Well, especially since people don't realize it, but Mandalorian actually does play a big part in the Star Wars trilogy, in the original trilogy, especially.
Talk about it.
Because Boba Fett ends up becoming the bounty hunter that takes Han Solo and brings Vader to Solo and them and on Bespin, and then takes his body, delivers him to Jabba, and ends up falling into the Sarlacc pit and supposedly not dying. But that's neither here nor there. But you don't realize it's one of those, when you first watch Empire and you watch Return of the Jedi, you go, okay, who is this guy and why should we be afraid of him? Yeah. Because it's like he's a dude in a suit.
Yeah. That's true. That's exactly who he is in those movies. So all right, so then the real
Hold up.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, something I almost hate to say, in the Disney canon, Jango is just some dude who stole armor.
That's true.
Yeah, I heard that.
He's no longer a Mandalorian, and it's disappointing.
It is disappointing.
It is very disappointing.
Well,
I think they screwed up.
Yeah, where is that established? It's in a comic?
I honestly can't recall.
I want to say it's in a comic, and this is the one kind of caveat I want to throw on.
It might be. No, I feel like it might have been in Rebels.
Okay.
Like, looking back on him.
Yeah, I can't place it in my head where I know it's a thing, but I can't place it. But one thing I have noticed about this Disney era, They wiped all the EU clean so that they could have a fresh start, but they've already managed to walk all over their own new canon in regards to the novels and the comics. Like,
Oh yeah.
They've already managed to screw it up. So like, there is a part of me that's like, well, it wasn't on the screen, so it doesn't count. And when I say screen, I mean live action. So I'm hoping that they could find some sort of caveat for that, but because I agree with you that is disappointing on some level. Or even if Django was like, not only did I take the armor, but like he's like the biggest cultural appropriator of all time. I would be okay with that too. All right, so what do we think about 9? Where are we at with that?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that they don't turn Rey dark, but
yeah, I don't think they'll do it. I don't think they have the balls, honestly.
I don't think so either. I watched your video this morning, and I agree with you. It's not a good business decision to turn her dark.
Yeah,
it just really is not.
Let me ask you this: What do you need information-wise, or what do you think you need? I think is the more appropriate question, because after you see something, you're like, oh, well, actually, this scratched an itch I didn't even realize was there, and that was more important. But at this point, what do you think you need answered or information on in order to feel satisfied by this sequel trilogy?
How is this rebellion even going to continue? They seem like they're fairly depleted.
Right. I think that's a big one. I think I need to know. I need to know the origins of the First Order. Like, I need to know where it came from. I feel like I do still need a little bit more information on Snoke. I don't think I need it to feel satisfied, but I think I want it. And I think it's possible I might get it in a comic, but it didn't really happen. If that's where it happens, but and I need some sort of lockdown on both Ben and Rey and the events of Luke's academy, like where it went wrong. I need that set in stone.
Definitely, it has to be because there's too many holes where you're trying to figure out what on earth is going on.
Yeah.
Why is this First Order around? How did they come about? Because at the end of Jedi, you're going, okay, we have the Emperor's dead, the Empire's dying, all the statues are toppling everywhere, the governments are getting back in order, and all of a sudden, you jump in and you have a government that's being taken over by a First Order. Who are these people?
Right, with huge weaponry.
Yes.
They're not the rebellion. They're established somehow.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. So, Gort, what questions do you have for this young lady today?
Oh, thank you.
I think always going to start off with what's your favorite lightsaber color?
Purple.
Purple. That's my favorite color too.
Popular choice.
It is. It should be.
I agree.
What is your favorite Star Wars movie poster?
Oh, geez. I want to say New Hope, but it's the one. It's the one where the lightsaber is straight up, where it's like got the
kind of superhero-esque one.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the inspiration for the 1995 He-Man Luke Power of the Force 2 figure.
Yes, and Anna pointed out this morning that there's an element of that thematically in the Last Jedi original poster as well.
Yes, there is.
Continue, Gordon.
What spaceship is parked in your driveway?
Oh, geez. I would have to say the Tantive 4.
That's a big
driveway.
Who is your favorite pod racer?
It has to be Anakin.
Ben Quadinaros is the correct answer.
All right. You're going to spend a day with Qui-Gon or Luke? Who's it going to be?
Qui-Gon.
Okay. And what is your favorite novel cover?
Children of the Jedi.
Anna, Bobby, what's your favorite novel cover?
I've been dreading you asking me that.
He's about to go start pulling the books off the shelf. Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You know what?
Go ahead.
You know what, though? Thrawn Alliances has a really good cover, too, though.
Yeah. I'll tell you the one that kind of like I often see in my head when I think of the EU is the cover of Betrayal, the first book in the whatever it is, Legacy of the Force, whatever the hell they chose with Darth Kaitis, like the Rise of Jason Solo. Like that one often sticks out in my head. But I think honestly, I prefer overall the more montagey ones because it used to get my imagination going. Like seeing the Rancor riders and those and seeing Sabaoth, whatever we found out his name is actually
Sabaoth.
And the ones I used to look at all the time also were the Jedi Academy ones, like the three.
Yes.
I used to look at those covers all the time, especially the female officer, Imperial officer, Dala.
Dala.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to think she was sexy on that cover too, so I think that has something to do with it as well. But those are the ones that stick out.
Mac.
Did you read the Jedi? Did you read the Young Jedi Academy books?
Is that the set of 3, or is that like the young readers?
The young readers,
Jedi
yeah.
Knights.
No,
Yeah, Young Jedi.
No, I didn't.
Those are actually, they're short reads, they're easy reads, but they're actually really good.
I don't doubt it. That era, looking back onto some of the stories, I feel like don't age as well. But whatever they were tapping into, that need for more Star Wars, there's something beautiful about it to me.
I always kind of assumed that you had probably read those books. With the Jaina and Jason.
And Lobaka and...
Yep. Tenel Ka.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
Tenel Ka is awesome. I wish they would.
You know what's
Tenel
cool
Ka.
about her? At the Disney park, one of the lightsabers has what looks like Rancor tooth on the bottom.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
That's neat. I like that.
And Seagal, was that one? That's why I always read the name. It's like the Mon Cal, isn't it? Seagal, Cilgal or something like that.
Sigil, maybe. I can't remember.
It's like a Mon Cal female, I think.
Yeah.
My favorite is probably the Courtship of Princess Leia with the Rancor on the cover.
Yeah.
Yes. That is a
very
good
striking
cover.
to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Anna, what is your favorite Star Wars film?
My favorite Star Wars film? Rogue One.
Wow. That's my wife's favorite as well.
Really?
Yep. What is your favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, geez. Canon or non-canon?
I'll accept either.
Mara Jade.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, she's cool. What about favorite non-Force using Star Wars character?
Chewbacca.
Yeah, not a bad choice either. Anna, we'll wrap this up. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys don't know how much you made my day.
No. The pleasure is all ours, and it was very nice to get a woman's perspective. And actually, you know what? Real quick before we get out of here, I do want to say this, that I think that a lot of the sexism, is it sexism, is it not sexism, regarding all of the sequel stuff is a bit it's a bit over exaggerated. I don't think that all the people that have problems with this stuff hate women. I also don't think that Disney is force feeding women down our throat simultaneously. However, if they do want to, I couldn't help myself. How do you feel about it as a female fan? We are getting more female characters. How do you feel about all of it? Do you feel like it's too much women, it's not enough women, that it's fine, that you love the women, that you love some, don't like some, just like normal people, I guess?
I don't think that it's too many women. I really don't. I don't think that they need to force any more in, though. I mean, if you have, it has to make sense. As long as they make sure that it makes sense, and it's not like, you're going to have the Dathomirian witches taking over the planet, type deal, and enslaving the men, then fine, But if you're going to show it, if you're going to have the universe be led by women, then make sure that they're powerful women.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to go on record as saying that Dathomir women taking over the planet and enslaving men, I'm up for that as well.
I am too.
Particularly if they're bald. I'm into that sort of thing. and I'm kind of a like forceful, type A personality in general. So obviously that means in the bedroom I like to be taken control of. But that's for another show. So with that being said, I do want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for all your support over the years, and it was an absolute pleasure to get a female perspective. And I hope that you'll come back on and give your thoughts on 9 briefly after that's said and done.
I would love to. It would be my pleasure.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me.
Gort, say something witty to get us out of here.
Oh,